Hey, this is John from Stub Group. We're a digital advertising agency and a premier Google partner, and we help businesses dominate advertising and make money online. And today I'm going to share at least some of the things that I think you should know about ads and advertising in 2025. We're going to talk about various platforms. We're going to talk about how legislation is impacting advertising. We're going to talk about the economy and all sorts of fun stuff. So buckle up and let's jump in. Let's talk about how the economy in 2025 may impact digital advertising. Obviously, the economy has a massive role in impacting how people are willing to pay for goods and services. When they have more money, more optimistic about where things are at, they're more likely to spend more. Conversely, less likely to spend when things are in a downturn. And obviously, different types of businesses do better during downturns or worse during upturns. Really depends on what you're in. But at the end of the day, there's two things I'm not going to do here. I'm not going to get political, and I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what the economy is going to be like in 2025. People far more intelligent than I get it wrong as well. So I'm not going to pretend to have a crystal ball. But I'll share some thoughts, observations, things that I'm seeing just chatting with our clients and just looking at the economy in general. And I would say overall, I have a sense, or I see a sense of optimism about where the economy will be in 2025. I see a lot of people who are excited about where things are going and who think that there will be kind of good times ahead. Obviously, there are the inverse of that as well. There are people who have a lot of concerns. But overall, I'd say the optimists seem to be outweighing the pessimists, at least for the people who I'm speaking with. Now, there are very specific things that could have significant impact on business performance and therefore on advertising. So, for example, a lot of tariffs have been proposed. And I'm recording this really right at the end of 2024 going into 2025. So, as of right now, don't know what tariffs will or will not come into being and how that may impact things. Obviously, if there are tariffs put in place, that impacts the cost of businesses who are importing goods from overseas, and that directly relates into then their margins and how they may have to increase prices, so forth and so on. At the same time, it can have an inverse effect on people who create goods within the U.S. if they are suddenly more competitive and so forth. So there's a lot of things in play and a lot of potential for change with a new administration coming in, and the reality that usually things do change when the power changes hands in politics. So a lot to watch, a lot of various perspectives, but I would say, again, from what I'm seeing, a lot of optimism about where the economy may go in 2025, which would be good news for advertisers as people being more likely to open up their wallets and purchase those goods and services. A reality of life right now and going into 2025 is that tracking and attribution digitally are a lot harder than they used to be. And I go into this in a bit of detail in the video that I made about how Google Ads will change in 2025. But at a high level, there's a lot of moves, having a lot of moves from browsers such as Safari and Firefox that make it harder to track what's happening after someone clicks on your ads. And there's also things like the more that people kind of correctly work with cookies and cookie consent banners and allowing people to consent prior to firing tracking code, the harder it is to fire tracking code because a lot of people say no, decline, when they have the option to be tracked or not tracked. And so it's just a lot harder. And I think I talked about this in my video last year, going into 2024, talking about things. So this is not a new concept, but it continues to be a reality. And it continues to be very important, A, to track as much as you can about how your campaigns are performing, but also be looking at big picture, look at your revenue, your bottom line, your media efficiency ratio, things like that, to understand how your media is performing, your media buys are performing, and to customize that over time. One very cool reality in 2025 is that AI video generation and image generation tools are making it much easier to produce really cool looking content. And this is being used and useful by advertisers both small and large. You've got advertisers as large as Coca-Cola leveraging AI in their advertising. And on the smaller side of things, this is something that small advertisers who maybe can't afford expensive design teams, video teams, etc., can leverage these tools to very easily and quickly create content. I think we're going to see a lot of this in 2025. Now, I don't think that this is the death yet of, photo shoots of products, of real live action video teams. There's still going to be a place for that, but there's also going to be a place for quick iteration, quick generation of videos, of images in a much more cost-effective way potentially than in the past. So watch out for lots more AI generated content in 2025. One very cool reality in 2025 is that AI video generation and image generation tools are making it much easier to produce really cool looking content. And this is being used and useful by advertisers both small and large. You've got advertisers as large as Coca-Cola leveraging AI in their advertising. And on the smaller side of things, this is something that small advertisers who maybe can't afford expensive design teams, video teams, etc., can leverage these tools to very easily and quickly create content. I think we're going to see a lot of this in 2025. Now, I don't think that this is the death yet of, photo shoots of products, of real live action video teams. There's still going to be a place for that, but there's also going to be a place for quick iteration, quick generation of videos, of images in a much more cost-effective way potentially than in the past. So watch out for lots more AI generated content in 2025. Legislation and court orders, or I should say the decisions of judges, are going to have some significant impacts potentially in 2025. Let's first talk about TikTok, because this is probably the most publicly understood or known potential for 2025. So I'm recording this early in the year, actually technically late end of December, early January 2025. And this is prior to the deadline for TikTok to either be delisted from app stores or sold to a US business. So I don't know exactly what is going to happen, but something is supposed to happen. And so in 2025, I believe there will be significant changes to TikTok, whether that be TikTok going away or having new ownership or some other various permutation. There will be changes. And so this is something that businesses who rely upon TikTok for traffic and sales, whether it be the organic side of things or the paid side of things, will need to watch carefully. And hopefully you've already done some diversifying away from that platform if that's a very significant platform for you. And obviously there's not much that we can influence right now as advertisers, legislation-wise, but it's something that we need to be aware of and watching closely and thinking about diversification because of what is coming. Google is also very much in the news. It has lost some significant cases in the US legal system, and there is a lot of pressure to break Google apart into separate business units. Now, whether or not that will happen or exactly how that will happen is not yet clarified, not yet for sure. And I think in 2025 that we're probably not going to see much change, just because of how long it takes for these types of things to happen, how much there's the appeals process, and just the wheels of justice tend to roll very slowly. So I don't think we'll probably see changes in 2025. Could be wrong, but probably after this year, my take is when we might get a better sense for what's going to happen, or I should say, if things are going to happen, what those things will be, and those things actually taking place, and potentially there being some kind of breaking apart of Google. There's another piece of legislation, or maybe a better way to put it is new rules that are being enforced in January of 2025. They're going to have a big impact on lead generators and just generally how businesses reach out to customers and to leads. And specifically, I'm talking about changes to the TCPA, which is the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. So in January 2025, there's some new rules that are coming out. One of the big ones is one-to-one consent. So it's this idea that if you're going to reach out to someone, call them, text them, for example, that you need to have explicit permission from them for your business to reach out to them. Now, this has a big impact on third-party lead generators and aggregators, because historically the way things have gone is, let's say you go to a website and you're looking for a better price for car insurance. You might fill out your information on a lead generation website, and you check the box, whatever, saying, yes, I'm okay being contacted. And then you start getting phone calls and text messages from State Farm and Geico and Farmers Insurance and so forth. Now, with this rule being put in place, what the government is saying is that you need to be explicitly giving permission to State Farm, to Geico, to Farmers Insurance, etc., to be reaching out to you. That it's not good enough to just say to this third-party website, yes, there's permission to reach out, but that you got to select, for example, a checkbox with the name of each place that might be reaching out to you, giving them explicit permission. So this is going to have a big impact on how lead generators and aggregators operate and how they can generate those leads, how they sell and transmit those leads to the purchasers of those leads, and so forth. So if you're in that space, big deal. And another kind of related rule that's being enforced here is that text messages are being considered essentially equal as phone calls when it comes to the do not call list. So for a long time, you've been able to add a phone number to a do not call list to cut down on telemarketing and so forth. And now text messages are being considered a part of that as well. So if you are on the do not call list, you shouldn't get text messages in the same way that you shouldn't get phone calls from telemarketers, from people who don't have explicit permission to be able to be reaching out to you. So a couple of significant changes in the kind of the telephone communication area, lead generation communication area, that it would be good for you to be aware of. I'm going to give a rundown of things you should be aware of in 2025 for some of the most important pay-per-click channels. When I say pay-per-click, I'm talking about specific type of channels. So there's all sorts of advertising channels available, but the big ones that the internet runs on, generally speaking, are Google Ads, Meta Ads, and some others that we'll dig into. And so I'm going to focus on those and kind of give you a bite-sized perspective on whether or not you should be using those platforms in 2025, and just some various things to think through as relates to them. Before I dig into specific platforms, I'm just going to talk for a minute about remarketing as a whole, because strategies around remarketing are, I'd say, fairly similar across many platforms. And remarketing, also called retargeting, is just the idea of serving ads to people who have been to your website, or not necessarily been to your website, but who you have in your customer list or lead list. So, for example, if they've been to your website, you can place cookies on them and then follow them around the web and serve ads to them. If they have purchased from you, maybe in a physical location, storefront, or through your website, they're on your email list, things like that. If you have their contact information, you can also leverage that for remarketing. And it's the idea of bringing people back to purchase who haven't purchased yet, as well as continuing to sell to people who are in your list, to people who have purchased from you previously, bringing them back to place repeat purchases and so forth. Remarketing is still a very powerful tool because it's an incredibly warm audience of people who are already aware of you, often have been qualified in some way if they're on your list, maybe have already purchased from you. And so it's a super warm audience, and also generally pretty cost effective to reach because it's both super warm and not too large, generally speaking. It's not like you're going after the millions of people available out there. You're going after the people who have already been to your website, who have already entered your email list, things like that. So it can be very effective. It can also be a source of frustration for many advertisers, especially using platforms like Google or Meta, where some campaign types on those platforms, looking at you Performance Max, will often kind of do a lot of remarketing serving of ads. And then because there's not a lot of great transparent reporting in those platforms, they'll say, hey, your campaign is performing really, really well. You've got a 10x ROAS for your Performance Max campaign, or fill in the blank. And yet actually kind of that really bottom funnel remarketing traffic is driving a lot of that. Now, that's not to say that it's a bad thing that you are doing remarketing or that people are coming back and purchasing from you. That's great. But it can skew how you understand the performance of your campaigns, and the idea that you need to be investing ad spend into getting people into your funnel. If you're focusing all of your money on people who are at the very, very bottom step, well, you will kind of optimize yourself into oblivion because you got to keep getting people into your funnel, keep creating brand awareness, and so forth. So remarketing, I wouldn't say has changed very much since last year when I made this video about what's going on in 2024, but still an important part of the overall marketing strategy that you should have, and also something that first-party data is very important in regards to. So first-party data is information that you can, for example, upload into the platforms, email addresses you have, phone numbers you have, things like that. You can leverage that for remarketing in many platforms like Google and Meta and so forth. Let's talk Google Ads in 2025. And if you want to kind of look at my predictions for 2025 as a whole for Google Ads, I made a whole separate video called something like what will change in Google Ads, or how will Google Ads change in 2025. So go check that out. But to kind of give an overview of where things are at and where things are going with Google, I would say Google Ads is still a tremendously important part of most advertisers' advertising plans. There are some advertisers where Google, for various reasons, doesn't play a big role. But for most people, if people are searching for the product or service that you sell, well, they're probably using Google to do that search. And so being able to come up in response to those searches can be incredibly effective. If you are looking to create awareness of your brand, well, YouTube is a fantastic place to be. People spend a ton of time on YouTube, and you can have a lot of great targeting opportunities and scale opportunities with YouTube. So there's a lot you can do with YouTube. And if you are selling products, shopping campaigns, performance max campaigns can have great results across Google and across Google's various properties. So for most advertisers, Google is still a very important part of the advertising plan. Now there are some upstarts that are nipping at Google's heels right now. For example, ChatGPT, which I also talk about in that other video that I mentioned. But I don't see in 2025 Google's search dominance significantly decreasing. I see them starting to lose percentage points here and there, but they will still be, I believe, the primary place that people go to find goods and services in 2025. And it will also continue to be expensive. I believe cost per clicks will continue to increase. There are always more and more advertisers who are trying to get into the pool of Google and extract value from that. And so it's just ever more and more important to make every click count in your Google Ads campaigns, and to have the right targeting, the right bidding strategies, the right creative in place to still be able to extract profit and not leave all of your money on the table in terms of paying Google but not making profit yourself as an advertiser. Meta had a rough 2024 in some ways. There were a lot of just glitches, really problematic glitches in 2024 that impacted advertisers. There were outages where everything went down, both from an advertiser and consumer perspective, and just a lot of inconsistency in performance and challenges in predicting performance because of those things. And so what I'm hoping to see in 2025 is more consistency and predictability. I'm hoping to see less big crazy changes that Meta is releasing and not fully debugging and QAing that then cause problems, and hopefully just a little bit more, hey, here's what we've got to work with, let's make it work. The thing that I believe will continue to be king in 2025 is just the creative, the actual creative, the ads, the videos, the text that you are putting onto Meta. And of course, when I say Meta, I'm talking about Facebook, talking about Instagram. From a targeting perspective, I've seen Meta's Advantage Plus campaigns and their AI targeting, AI-controlled targeting campaigns to do a better job in many cases than manual targeting. I think Meta's really figured out a lot of things well when it's come to targeting. Perfect? By no means, but they've made some good progress, I think. But again, really it comes down to the quality of the creative and testing different creative, different ideas, different angles, freshening creative, etc. That's really, I think, what sets the bad advertisers apart from the great advertisers, is just the creative side of things and finding what connects. And sometimes what you think is going to connect is not what connects. You can spend thousands of dollars on a finely polished ad that then does terribly, and you can throw up a little sticky note ad that you design in 2 minutes and it can do fantastically. So that's why testing is really important, just throwing different options out there and seeing what works. And that's also where AI generated imagery and video can help. It can give you more ideas and more things to test and in a way that's relatively cost effective. So I'm not saying necessarily that all of your videos, all of your images should be AI generated. Obviously there's things that play into that, but I would say take advantage of the tools available to you and test lots and lots of different things in 2025. One nuance of Meta that I want to talk about is Meta messaging and lead form campaigns. So messaging campaigns are where you're sending people directly into Messenger from your ads for them to chat with you. And lead form ads are where people are actually filling out their information, submitting it to you from within Meta's platform. If they're on Facebook, they're on Instagram, without even getting to your landing page. And the great thing about those types of campaigns is low friction. People aren't leaving that platform, so it's much easier for them to just go ahead and send their information. The challenge historically has always been the quality. Because there's less friction, there's also generally less quality. And it can be hard to actually get people to pick up the phone if they filled out a form submission and then you're trying to call them, things like that. And so one of the things I'm very interested to explore in 2025 is how AI tools can assist with actually getting you in contact with people who've reached out through messaging, reached out through forums, even reached out through things like comments on Facebook posts and Instagram posts. And as an example of this, I had a really fascinating conversation with the founder of Pitchit, which is one of a number of tools that is really looking to use AI tools to make those connections. So for example, I have no affiliation with Pitchit. I'm not making any money from saying this. I'm just using them as one example of different tools that are doing this. But they can get a form submission from Facebook, for example, and then actually call with an AI-generated voice, have an initial conversation with a lead and see if they are warm, see if they're interested in speaking with a real human, and then make that connection with a real human, actually transfer the call. And instead of your team having to dial constantly, and just deal with rejection, deal with people not answering, and you're paying them money to be doing something that's not driving value, you can let AI tools like this do that work for you and then connect those warm leads to your sales people to then turn into sales. So some very interesting opportunities. Obviously, there's also challenges that come with that. There's no perfect thing in this world, and so there's things that are constantly being improved when it comes to those processes. But some really interesting ways to kind of play the numbers game of maybe generating somewhat lower quality leads from campaign types like a Facebook lead forms, but then being able to just dial through them at scale and find the people who actually want to talk to your salespeople. LinkedIn ads. LinkedIn is one of these platforms where I feel like the potential is fantastic, but it often doesn't live up to that potential from an advertising perspective. And what I mean by that is that from a targeting perspective, LinkedIn is almost unparalleled with other platforms in that you can know so much about the people that you want to target. If you want to target specific job types, specific companies, specific, obviously geos and things like that, but there's so much specificity you can get into because people put so much information into their profiles about who they work for, what type of industry they're in, what their job title is, how long they've been there, etc. So from a targeting perspective, it's incredibly rich data. But from an engagement perspective, from people actually responding to LinkedIn ads and those turning into leads and sales, it can be rough. Now, I'm sure someone's watching this and saying, I am crushing it with LinkedIn ads for this client or for my business. And I'm sure you are. Obviously, there are plenty of people who can do well with LinkedIn ads, but I think it's very, very much hit and miss. Some of the areas I've seen more success with for our clients on the LinkedIn side of things is kind of what I would say a bit higher funnel, like getting them into your funnel through LinkedIn. So things like document ads, where you are leveraging the ad type, where people can fill out a form to get, let's say, a white paper or just some relevant document, some piece of information. We've seen some success in generating form submissions with that type of ad. The quality of those submissions can be hit or miss, better in some industries than others. But it's one of those platforms where I'd say, especially if you're in the B2B space and you're wanting to go after people who work for businesses and you have very specific criteria, maybe the type of business they work for, even if you're targeting very specific accounts, kind of doing account-based marketing, and you want to serve as everybody who's working for Coca-Cola in this specific type of job or whatever, there's a lot of stuff you can do with LinkedIn. But again, it can be very, very hit or miss. So it takes a lot of testing, a lot of creativity. It's the right place for some companies, not the right place for other companies. X, or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, has a lot of potential as well as a platform. Costs are, I'd say, relatively low. Like there's a lot of engagement and a lot of advertisers who aren't on X. And so you can get a lot of traffic, a lot of impressions, a lot of clicks for relatively inexpensively. So that is always a good thing. Obviously, the quality of that traffic is the next question, and that can be hit or miss. We have some clients that are seeing good results, some that have had a hard time getting it to work. One interesting thing to be aware of, if you're not already, is that X is actually a placement for Google Ads campaigns. So when you're running some types of Google Ads campaigns, your ads can also be serving on the X platform. And it's been interesting to dig into the data in our Google campaigns and see for what types of advertisers that works really well, and then for what types of advertisers there's just really terrible conversion rates, and we might want to opt out. So a little nuance there to be aware of. But I'd say it's a really interesting platform. From a remarketing perspective, I would say for a lot of businesses, there's a lot of value in at least doing remarketing. So people who've been to your website, then serving X ads to them as they spend time on X, that can be effective. And then from a cold audience perspective as well, for some businesses, it can work really well. Creative is really important. Video can do really well on X. And obviously, as with all platforms, sending them to the right place, having a good funnel in place after they leave X to get to your website is an important part of turning that into profitability for you. Reddit ads. Reddit is not one of the top ad platforms that generally comes to mind for most people. Reddit as a website won in 2024 with their partnership or licensing or whatever you want to call it with Google, where Google is grabbing a lot of data from Reddit, and we've seen a significant increase in rankings for a lot of Reddit content. And so we've seen Reddit traffic to Reddit significantly increase because of all of that organic search visibility. Now, as an advertising platform, Reddit is very cool because you can advertise against relevant content. So, keywords contextually target specific threads or subreddits, things like that. And so if you have a product or a service that's very relevant to something that people are engaged with on Reddit, maybe have a subreddit or something like that, that can be really, really powerful for you to serve your ads against that content. And we've seen some clients have a lot of success. For example, we had a client who was targeting people who were going to specific music festivals, and they were selling clothing to them, clothing that was kind of well suited for people who would be interested in those music festivals. And we saw some pretty good results from that because you are reaching people who kind of inherently are interested in attending those events because they're on Reddit talking about it, reading content about it, preparing for trips, etc. That's just one example. There's lots of other examples. So again, is it a must for your business to be on? It's not a must. It's not at the same level as a Google or a Meta, for example. But for some advertisers, probably more than you think, it can be a very, very intriguing channel to test out. I'm going to lump a couple of other platforms in together. We're talking Pinterest, we're talking Quora, we're talking Snapchat, we're talking Etsy. Each of these is a unique platform. It's got a unique audience that's not necessarily similar to each other. So I'm not grouping them together because they're similar to each other per se. I'm more grouping them together because they're definitely, for most advertisers, pretty far in the tail end of digital advertising that you may do. Now, there are, of course, always exceptions to that rule. There are advertisers who are spending thousands, tens of thousands of dollars a day on something like a Snapchat, for example. But for most advertisers, they're more of a, hey, we've kind of exhausted all of our other opportunities with more of the obvious players like Google, like a Meta, for example. How can we expand to these platforms? Now, there are edge cases where it's like, hey, our audience is the type of person who is on Pinterest constantly, and so I think we're going to see really good results by really going after Pinterest hard and advertising our brand on there. That can work great. That can work fantastically. But that's more of an edge case, not the majority of advertisers. So there's a place for all these platforms. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them. We don't do a lot on these platforms for our clients just because they are generally more edge cases. And so if the audience that serves that is a good fit for you and you've got the time and money, I'd say even before the money, talk about time, because every platform you go into is just going to take more time, more investment, and you want to make sure that it's got enough potential for return to justify making that time investment and, of course, the money investment as well. Amazon ads. If you're selling products on Amazon, Amazon has really become pay to play in many ways these days. There are so many placements for ads that you kind of have to be using ads in many cases to really get the visibility you want. Even if you're ranking well organically, you could still, if you're not targeting your own brand name, for example, then Amazon's probably going to show other competitors who are targeting your brand when people search for you, even by brand on Amazon, and you're going to lose some sales due to that. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into the strategy on Amazon, other than to say if you are advertising on Amazon, definitely, or I should say if you're selling products on Amazon, you should very seriously consider running advertising on Amazon. And also, there is now the option to run ads on Amazon that aren't just selling products on Amazon, that are actually pointing to third-party websites. And so there's some very interesting, Amazon knows a lot about people who are using Amazon, know a lot about their customers, what their purchasing habits are, demographics, psychographics, etc. And there's a lot of different targeting options that you can leverage as an advertiser to potentially drive traffic from Amazon to your third-party website. So that can be very cool to look into, similar to some of those other platforms I talked about, which are maybe not the first place that you go, generally speaking, but that are places you can expand to as you kind of tap out the best performing traffic in some of the other platforms like a Google or a Meta, for example. TikTok ads. Well, I already talked about TikTok earlier in this video and the uncertainty of what's going to happen in 2025. So that is the biggest point when it comes to TikTok ads. Will TikTok be a platform or not? If it continues to be a platform, some people are seeing a lot of success with TikTok ads. I would say it's definitely one of those kind of hit or miss platforms, and it really all comes down to the creative. It's so creative driven. Some TikToks hit, some don't. And so it's a matter of looking for the ones that hit. And then if one hits, you can have incredible scale and make a lot of money. And so it's about testing creative, really, I would say, for success with TikTok. But will it be a thing? That is the question, and we shall see. I'm going to give an honorable mention to a platform you've probably never heard of, and that's called AppLovin. And this platform really blew up in Q4, I would say, of 2024, at least in terms of people being aware of it and visibility and advertisers jumping onto it. Now, it's probably, for most advertisers, it's not going to be a great fit, at least right now, because they're looking for very, very high spending advertisers. So ideally brands, I think they're spending $20K per day on Meta is an example of a brand that they're looking to bring over to the AppLovin platform. So for most advertisers, not a great fit. But what AppLovin does is it serves ads generally across apps, mobile apps. So you're playing Candy Crush or something like that, you see ads come up. Some of those may be served by AppLovin. And they're by far not the only company that serves those types of ads. Google serves ads on apps, Meta serves ads on apps, etc. But from at least the data that I've seen from a lot of people who are in those larger D2C businesses and who have been testing it out, they've seen some really great results where they can spend a lot of money and get decent ROI. And that kind of sounds intuitive. It's like, well, why is it great that you can spend a lot of money on a platform? But a lot of companies are looking for scale. So those are the beauties of Google and Meta is scale. You can invest into a platform and get a lot of results because there are a lot of people using that. And it's hard for a lot of newer platforms or other kind of aggregators of platforms to match that and justify the time investment of working with that platform. And it seems like AppLovin may have solved some of that. Now, I have not used AppLovin myself directly, so I have no direct personal perspective on it. I've seen a lot of people talking about it, good and bad, but I'd say I've seen a lot more good than bad. And so, if you are on the larger advertiser side of things and you're looking to expand beyond Meta and find another platform that can help you scale or that has scale, AppLovin might be something to check out. I would be remiss to end this video without talking about social commerce, because this is another thing that it's already powerful in 2024, but I think will continue to grow in 2025. Social commerce is the idea of these social platforms like Instagram, like TikTok, and now YouTube, which has added this in 2024, I should say, where you have the ability for creators to essentially be affiliates directly within the platform and to talk about a product, to promote a product, and then to send people to directly purchase that product from the platform, from the social platform that they're in. And some creators are doing crazy revenue numbers from this. Some brands doing crazy revenue numbers from this. And there's a lot of opportunity here. It's not a new concept. Obviously, affiliate marketing, far from a new concept. Influencer marketing, far from a new concept. But what's happening, and YouTube is the most recent significant platform kind of to the party, is just that ability to have very little friction in the interaction. You see a creator, potentially a creator that you follow, that you trust, talking about a product, and right there on your phone, you can tap to go buy that. You don't have to go do a Google search and find it yourself and go through that process. It's right there. It's super easy. And so that's driving big numbers for a lot of brands in 2025. And with that, I'm going to wrap this video. There are all sorts of other things I could include, and I'd love for you to jump into the comments and say, well, why didn't you talk about this, talk about that? And we can have conversations, because obviously one single video is not enough time to address everything that may be coming in 2025. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of an overview of some of the different platforms, what's going on, some of the things I think you should be aware of in 2025. And if you are looking for help with digital advertising or just marketing in general across a variety of platforms, we'd love to help here at Stub Group. Reach out through stubgroup.com. Let's chat and see how we can make 2025 the best year yet for your business.